Neanderthals, the lost humans. What do you think of when you hear the word Neanderthal? Maybe you imagine a big, strong man with a club living in a dark cave and making strange noises. For a long time, people believed that Neanderthals were not very intelligent, more like animals than humans. But now, science tells a different story. Today, we know that Neanderthals were much more like us than we used to think. In fact, they were human, just a different kind of human. The story of the Neanderthals begins more than 300,000 years ago. They lived mostly in Europe and parts of Asia during a time called the Ice Age. The world was cold, wild, and full of danger. Giant animals walked across the frozen lands: mammoths, woolly rhinos, and saber-toothed cats. To survive in this world, the Neanderthals developed strong, short bodies. Their wide noses helped warm the freezing air. Their strong arms and legs helped them walk through snow, climb rocks, and carry heavy tools. But they were not just strong. They were smart. They learned how to hunt, how to cook, and how to use fire. If you saw a Neanderthal today wearing modern clothes, you would notice they looked different, but not so different. You would see a human face, a strong jaw, a large nose, deep eyes. Maybe they would look back at you wondering the same. Neanderthals lived in small groups, maybe 10 to 30 people. They stayed together like families. Everyone helped. Men and women hunted, gathered plants, cooked food, and cared for the children. They often lived in caves, but they could also build shelters using wood, stones, and animal skins. They made fires to keep warm, to cook, and to protect themselves. Imagine sitting around the fire with them after a long, cold day, sharing food, stories, and silence under the stars. Life was not easy. Many Neanderthals had broken bones, missing teeth, or signs of injury. But they survived. They took care of each other. One famous skeleton is of an old man who had no teeth. He must have lived many years after losing them, which means others helped feed him. They didn't leave the weak behind. They cared. What did they eat? That depended on where they lived. In cold areas, they hunted reindeer, bison, and mammoths. These hunts were dangerous and needed teamwork. Neanderthals didn't have bows and arrows. They used spears and got close to the animals. Can you imagine running toward a huge mammoth with just a spear? That took courage. In warmer places, they ate birds, rabbits, fish, and seafood. On the coast of Spain, Neanderthals hunted seals and even dolphins. They gathered shellfish and cooked them over the fire. Some communities ate a lot of plants: mushrooms, pine nuts, moss, and fruits. They were not just meat eaters. They were flexible, clever, and good at finding food. And they cooked their meals in different ways. Some meat was roasted. Some food was boiled into soup or broth. Some was dried or eaten raw. They even used plants to make their meals tastier or easier to eat. They were not just survivors, they were cooks. Neanderthals also made tools. They broke stones to make sharp knives, scrapers, and spears. They used these to cut meat, clean animal skins, and build shelters. They also used a kind of glue made from birch trees called birch tar to attach parts of their tools together. They understood nature and used it well. Some groups may have made simple boats or rafts to travel across water. Others used fire in a smart way, placing it in special places inside caves to avoid smoke. This shows they knew about air and ventilation. They even made stone fireplaces or hearths. Some groups had small storage areas to keep food or tools. All of this tells us they planned, they learned, they adapted. And they were not only practical, they were creative. In caves in Spain, scientists found carvings, lines and symbols made by Neanderthal hands. Were they decorations? Messages? We may never know, but we know they had imagination. In some places, bone flutes have been found. Yes, music. These flutes were made from animal bones and had holes like modern instruments. Maybe they used them in rituals or to copy animal sounds during hunts. Or maybe they just liked the sound. Imagine a Neanderthal child blowing into a flute near the fire, laughing at the funny noise. They also wore ornaments. Some Neanderthals made simple necklaces using feathers, shells, or animal teeth. They may have painted their bodies or faces for special occasions. They even buried their dead. In many places, Neanderthal graves have been found. Some people were placed carefully in the ground. Sometimes, flowers or animal bones were added. Maybe this was a sign of love, respect, or even a belief in life after death. Can you imagine what they believed? Did they think about the stars? Did they tell stories to explain the world? Maybe they looked at the moon and wondered, like we do. We don't know what words they used, but we know they had a voice. They had a part of the brain used for language, and their bones show they could make many different sounds. They probably had a simple language made of short words, sounds, and gestures. Enough to say, "Come here," "danger," "food," "I love you." For thousands of years, Neanderthals lived across Europe and parts of Asia. But then another group of humans appeared, Homo sapiens, our ancestors. They came from Africa and moved north. At some point, they met the Neanderthals. And something amazing happened. They didn't only fight, they also fell in love. They had children. Today, many people in Europe and Asia carry Neanderthal DNA. Around 2% of your genes might come from them. This means part of them lives in us. But this meeting also brought change. Homo sapiens had different tools and better communication. They lived in bigger groups. They moved more quickly. Their way of life was different. Slowly, Neanderthals began to disappear.
And why?
That's a question scientists are still trying to answer. One idea is that the climate changed. The world became warmer. Forests replaced the open grasslands. The animals Neanderthals hunted started to disappear. Life became harder. Another idea is that diseases came with the new humans. Maybe Neanderthals got sick and their bodies couldn't fight the illness. Or maybe it was just competition, fewer places to live, less food to hunt. Neanderthals lived in smaller groups and had fewer babies. Over time, their numbers dropped. It's also possible that many Neanderthals joined human groups. They became part of our story. Their culture, their knowledge, and their children mixed with ours. They didn't vanish, they changed. The last Neanderthals disappeared around 40,000 years ago. But they didn't leave us nothing. They left us tools, art, and music. They left bones and fire pits. They left signs of kindness, creativity, and intelligence. And inside our own bodies, they left something more: DNA. A little piece of their story lives in many of us. A quiet voice from the past whispering, "We were here. We lived. We mattered." Neanderthals were not stupid or violent. They were brave, clever, and human. They lived in a world full of ice, danger, and wonder. They loved their families, cared for the sick, made music, cooked food, and explored new lands. They were not just part of history. They are part of us.